In June of this year, the United States has seen some of the biggest uprisings of people of color that has spanned across all major U.S. cities and even small towns. Minneapolis had erupted into a great blaze after the police murder of George Floyd that was fueled by the people. All around the country, the heavily militarized police were unable to handle the sheer force of collective action. For leftists across the country, it was a sight to behold. In understanding how to take this momentum further, as the U.S. government strengthens its resolve to crack down on minorities, we must look to history of past revolutionaries to guide us in fomenting revolution. Perhaps the greatest example of how to create the foundations for revolution lies with the Black Panther Party. In October 1966, at the North Oakland Service Center in California, Huey P Newton and Bobby Seale created the Black Panther Party. They wrote their 10-point program and implemented it in their communities. Newton expected the program to last only a few months, petering out into obscurity. But just the opposite occurred, as the Black Panther Party was to be one of the most successful revolutionary organizations in American history that would inspire future generations of socialists and communists up to the modern day. The party must be taken as an example of how to successfully rally the people together towards the path of socialism, and a lesson to learn how to avoid the pitfalls of catastrophe. The 10-point program was written in under 10 minutes. It states, 1. We want freedom. We want power to determine the destiny of our black community. We believe that black people will not be free until we are able to determine our destiny. 2. We want full employment for our people. We believe that the federal government is responsible and obligated to give every man employment or a guaranteed income. We believe that if the white American businessman will not give full employment, then the means of production should be taken from the businessman and placed in the community so that the people of the community can organize and employ all of its people and give a high standard of living. 3. We want an end to the robbery by the capitalists of our black people, and now we are demanding the overdue debts of 40 acres and 2 mules. 40 acres and 2 mules were promised 100 years ago as restitution for slave labor and mass murder of black people. We will accept the payments in currency in which will be distributed to our communities. The Germans are now aiding the Jews in Israel for the genocide of the Jewish people. The Germans murdered 6 million Jews. The American racist has taken part in the slaughter of over 50 million black people. Therefore, we feel that this is a modest demand that we make. 4. We want decent housing, fit for shelter of human beings. We believe that white landlords will not give decent housing to our black community, and the housing and the land should be made into cooperatives so that our community, with government aid, can build and make decent housing for its people. 5. We want education for our people that exposes the true nature of this decadent American society. We want education that teaches us our true history and our role in the present-day society. We believe in an educational system that will give to our people a knowledge of self. If a man does not have knowledge of himself and his position in society and the world, then he has little chance to relate to anything else. 6. We want all black men to be exempt from military service. We believe that black people should not be forced to fight in the military service to defend a racist government that does not protect us. We will not fight and kill their people of color in the world who, like black people, are being victimized by the white racist government of America. We will protect ourselves from the force and violence of the racist police and the racist military by whatever means necessary. 7. We want an immediate end to police brutality and murder of black people. We believe that we can end police brutality in our black community by organizing black self-defense groups that are dedicated to defending our black community from racist police suppression brutality. The Second Amendment to the Constitution of the United States gives a right to bear arms. 8. We believe that all black people should be released from the many jails and prisons because they have not received a fair and impartial trial. 9. We want all black people, when brought to trial, to be tried in court by a jury of their peer group or group from their black communities, as defined by the Constitution of the United States. We believe that the court should follow the United States Constitution so that black people will receive fair trials. The 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution gives a man a right to be tried by his peer group. A peer is a person from a similar economic, social, religious, geographical, environmental, historical, and racial background. To do this, the court will be forced to select a jury from the black community from which the black defendant came from. We have been and are being tried by all-white juries that have no understanding of the average reasoning man of the black community. 10. We want land, bread, housing, education, clothing, justice, and peace. And as our major political objective, a United Nations supervised plebiscite to be held throughout the black colony, in which only black colonial subjects will be allowed to participate for the purpose of determining the will of black people as to their national destiny. Well, in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume, among the powers of the earth, the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among them, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever an institute a new government, laying its foundation on such principles, and organizing its powers in such form, as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evidences a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty, to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Newton and Seal set to work with patrolling Oakland and gathering members. The first member they recruited was Bobby Hutton, a 15-year-old boy who worked at the service center with Seal and was an enthusiastic supporter of the program. The party first implemented Point 7 and began to patrol the streets, guns at the ready. When cops saw the Panthers observing them during traffic stops, they would be frightened and drive away. Newton said that sometimes he would take out a law book and started reading the penal code very loudly so everyone on the block could hear and learn. When someone was arrested, the party would post their bail, showing that the party has the back of the community. This was their main method of recruitment. Soon their membership and patrols were growing, then patrolling Richmond, Berkeley, and San Francisco. It was going to set in motion their increased fame with the public and notoriety with the state. In February 1967, Newton met Eldridge Cleaver, an ex-convict who was becoming a prominent name in the movement as his new book, Saul on Ice, was getting popular acclaim. Cleaver informed Newton that Malcolm X's widow, Betty Shabazz, was going to need an armed escort as she feared she would be assassinated during her speech at a program honoring Malcolm on the anniversary of his death. Newton, Eldridge, and some other Panthers, guns in hand, walked to the entrance of the San Francisco airport and escorted Shabazz to the car. They took her downtown to the Ramparts magazine building. When she was ready to leave for the event, the press and the police swarmed the office. Shabazz said she wanted no photographs of her, so the Panthers blocked her with magazines while escorting her to the car. A reporter attempted to rip the magazine out of Newton's hands, which Newton held on to, and demanded he let go of his property. The reporter then pushed Newton, in which Newton punched him back. Shabazz made it to the car safely, while Newton was stuck explaining the situation to police. The police threatened to arrest Newton, in which Newton commanded the Panthers to spread out and warned the police that if they pulled any guns, it was going to be a bloodbath. The Panthers managed to back away to their cars and drive to the program. After these events, Cleaver joined the party. On April 1st, 1967, Dezel Dows was killed by a police officer. The reason behind his death was that he was running away from a stolen car that he allegedly was in. The Dows came to the Panthers to help them figure out what really happened. The Panthers carried out an investigation and found many discrepancies with the official story, the main one being that Dezel could not possibly run due to a hip injury he had most of his life. The Panthers held a rally that inspired the people of the North Richmond neighborhood to find justice for Dezel. The Panthers held another community meeting, this time with two attorneys. The attorneys agreed that Dezel was murdered. However, both being public attorneys, there was little they could do. They recommended that they go see Sheriff Younger, who was the head of the precinct. The Panthers and the people took arms and marched to the office, which was totally blocked off by the police. With enough intimidation, the Dows eventually got to see the sheriff, who simply told them that there was no misconduct in the Dezel's case. If they wanted to change the law on justified homicide, they should go to the legislature. With this event, the Panthers' numbers only grew, and so was their trust with the community. Later on that month, a Republican state representative was pushing into law the Mumford Bill, for the express purpose of getting the Panthers, as he said on live television. The Panthers planned to march on the state capitol legislature in Sacramento, armed of course, and Bobby Seale was to read the Executive Mandate Number 1. The mandate essentially stated that the Mumford Act was simply the beginning of the state ramping up a war against black Americans and other people of color, and a call to action for every minority to arm themselves before it's too late. The result of this speech was the arrest of every Panther in Capitol Hill, but now the Panthers had national recognition and became a household name across the nation. Newton went on television to raise cash for the $50,000 bail, and within a few hours the party received $5,000. The party grew exponentially around the country, chapters being established all around, yet many needed the assistance of the originals to get them off the ground. Newton saw that the party needed to have administration to fully flesh out these new parties, but the resources in Oakland were limited, and many of the Panthers had almost no experience in doing such work. The Panthers decided to hand over the party reins to Stokely Carmichael and the heads of SNCC. Unfortunately, SNCC interpreted the merger as co-option and ruthlessly criticized the Panthers for such an idea. On October 28, 1967, Huey P. Newton was out on the town with his friend Gene McKinney. They were pulled over by two officers. The officers recognized Newton and asked him and Gene to step out of the car. Newton took a book about the criminal law with him. The officer searched Huey and forced him towards the officer's cruiser. Huey raised up the book, in which the officer then said, "You can take your book and shove it up your ass, N-word." He then punched Newton in the face, making him stumble back a few feet. Then he was shot in the stomach by the officer. Huey blacked out, and Gene got Huey to a hospital. Huey was under arrest at the hospital, and once partially recovered, was taken to jail. His trial was about whether or not Huey was guilty of killing Officer John Frey. He was found guilty and sentenced to 2 to 15 years in prison. This ignited the Free Huey movement, bolstering the Black Panther Party. Leading the Free Huey campaign was Cleaver, who made grand changes to the party, emphasizing more armed patrols in the black communities and calling for an offensive on the American Empire. These commands would result in the death of Bobby Hutton, when on April 6, 1968, Cleaver led the Panthers to ambush Oakland police officers. The Panthers were outgunned, and Bobby surrendered himself, but the police shot him regardless. Cleaver, as well as the rest of the party leadership, would become more divided over numerous issues. One was when Stokely Carmichael left SNCC and joined the party, and instigated debate on whether or not the Panthers should ally at all with any multiracial or white groups, and if white people could even be a part of black liberation. Cleaver took Carmichael's side. The tension created by this dispute was so great that SNCC and the Panthers had a gun battle on the University of California campus in Los Angeles in the summer of 1969. The distrust was another bludgeon against the party as leaders tried to hold their power. Cleaver was in Algiers, in Algeria, and was getting forged letters from the FBI, which to him were from party members. The letters regurgitated discontent with the Central Committee, essentially that Newton and David Hillard were making a mess of things. This set into motion for Cleaver to become increasingly antagonistic towards Newton, Hillard, and Seale. This is famously exemplified when Huey Newton appeared on television in 1971 to help raise bail for Bobby Seale, who was accused of ordering the torture and death of an alleged Panther police informant in New Haven, Connecticut. Cleaver was supposed to call into the show to promote his wife Kathleen's speaking tours, but instead he denounced Hillard for purging key party members and the Central Committee for driving the party into the ground. Newton was furious that Cleaver would throw the party under the bus on live television and banned him and his wife from the party. The factionalism reached its peak, and with several chapters around the country removing themselves from the party and siding with Cleaver. While internal conflicts helped lead to the collapse of the party, the FBI played a hand with their program to take them down, counterintelligence program, or COINTELPRO. They sent forged letters, assassinated the heads of the Panther organizations around the country like Fred Hampton in Chicago, sending in agents disguised as Panthers, stirring conflict with black nationalist organizations and gangs, surveilling them through tapping phones and tracing calls, and funding far-right terrorist organizations like the Minutemen in Oakland. Showing these divisions, as well as taking advantage of internal conflicts in the party, led the FBI to ultimately crush the Black Panthers and so many other socialist and civil rights organizations. While the period between 1968 to 1971 was an extremely turbulent period for the party, much was accomplished in helping legitimize the Panthers to the black community. In 1969, the Panthers began their first food programs in Oakland, which quickly became popular around the nation, feeding 10,000 children a day. So popular, in fact, the federal government mandated the school breakfast program in 1975 to be a permanent component of the welfare system. Other programs the Panthers started were the free medical clinics, community-run schools, anti-drug programs, clothing, dentistry, legal aid and education, new services, plumbing, and pest control. Many of these programs are still being carried out by socialists today, and Black Lives Matter. With these programs in full operation, the party membership was enormous. By the end of 1969, there were 45 chapters across the nation, with an average of 5,000 members per chapter. Even with the success of these programs, the party was utterly decimated by the early 70s. Cleaver began an underground guerrilla war group known as the Black Liberation Army, which set out to begin warfare on the police. This resulted in a further crackdown on the entire black community, and shootouts were becoming increasingly common between the Panthers and the police. Open warfare was also becoming a massive problem between Panthers and other black nationalist organizations, such as US Organization LA, as well as between Panthers themselves. Newton and Seal were sending out hits against other Panthers, and even anyone who disrespected them personally, like Newton allegedly murdering a 17-year-old sex worker, Kathleen Smith, for calling Newton baby. Newton became a drug addict and was increasingly more erratic, so much so he beat Bobby Seale with a bullwhip, which led Seale to resign from the party. The collapse of the party created a huge power vacuum in several black neighborhoods, which led to the rise of the nation's most notorious gangs. Such as in Oakland, what was once an underground guerrilla arm of the Panthers became the Crips. The all-out bloodbaths between the Panthers and black nationalist groups still haunts much of the animosity between organized crime today. The Black Panthers were the pinnacle of the U.S. left, debatably in all of its history. It was one of the most popular and strongest leftist movements in all of the nation, and a real threat to the U.S. empire, as the Panthers' survival programs helped create autonomous black neighborhoods, and their armed patrols sent the police packing. It may be the only U.S. political party that was for the people, by the people. It demonstrated that even in these segregated and forgotten neighborhoods made up of black people, that they could get a taste of freedom by putting their destiny into their own hands. The Panthers also provide a lesson for us today. The centralized leadership made the war of egos a destructive force that was not accountable to the rest of the party or the community. No members were able to impeach leadership or even really criticize it when necessary. This lack of accountability led to easy infiltration, as anyone could claim to be a Panther and claim they had authority when they were FBI, thus furthering distrust and division. While women made up a substantial portion of the party and did much of the work, very few held leadership positions and took on very gender-domestic work, like teaching and feeding children and medical work, while the majority of men did street patrols, printing and writing news, as well as administrative tasks. The pitfalls of centralization and sexism must be overcome to avoid the storm that the FBI created. The revolutionary spirit of the Panthers lives on in all oppressed people today. As revolutionaries who shaped the modern left. We must carry on their legacy and continue making revolution and see through it to the very end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. It's been a long time in the making, but I felt the time was right to release it. If you want to see more leftist history, consider contributing to my Patreon. I just graduated from college, so probably like many of you, I'm racked with student debt. So I could really use anything at all. Next video I'm hoping to cover some African Latin American movements. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.
Fighting for years for land that is ours. We'll always come out shouting, Black power! Black power! People are fighting and teaching every hour. Always heading slow but sure for